Good day and welcome to In the Know. I'm your host, Lisa Pickering. And today we'll be talking with the Minister of Home Affairs, Senator Michael Fahy, regarding new legislation aimed at providing pathways for Bermuda status and permanent residency. Minister Fahy, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let's just jump into things. Let's talk about why this law is being amended.
Sure. This is an area of real concern and has been, I think, for many, many years to many people living in Bermuda, and indeed Bermudians. For a long time, since the last time we had status really granted as status was by committee 20, 30 years ago. Since then, there's been changes to the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act to give people pathways to permanent residency. But currently, the only way in which anyone is entitled to get status is if you are actually married to a Bermudian for a certain period of time, or indeed if you're obviously born to a Bermudian in Bermuda. Which means you're immediately recognized as Bermudian. So we've seen many, many instances of complete inequities in the system where you have brothers and sisters who are, one is Bermudian and one is not. You have parents in the same boat. So these are things that really need to be fixed for any number of reasons. One primarily is a human rights issue, but it's also about those who have contributed to the economic vibrancy and lifeblood of Bermuda for many, many, many years, and have no real security to remain in Bermuda of any kind. So it's really something that actually needs to be addressed, and we believe now is a time to have it addressed, certainly as a result of issues to do with the European Convention on Human Rights and international law.
So let's just talk about, first of all, PRC and what kind of details that entails in changing and updating the legislation.
Sure. So the primary two things that you'll see in relation to the new legislation would be those individuals who have been in Bermuda for at least 20 years and are Commonwealth citizens would be entitled to make an application for status. So it's 20 years for status. For those persons who have been here at least 15 years would have an opportunity to make an application for a permanent residency certificate. And then, of course, if they are here for an additional period of time and hit 20 years, then at that time they'd be able to make an application for status. There are obviously a whole number of other rafts that will be included to fix some other inequities that exist in the current state of affairs to do with family connections and the like.
In terms of numbers, what are you estimating in PRC and in status?
In terms of those numbers, we're looking at a few thousand in complete totality. What we've done is we've extracted data from the last census and extrapolated that data as to who is likely still to be remaining in Bermuda. What we found is that most people that come to Bermuda come here on a work permit and then they're here for around about 7 or 8 years. After that, the numbers get smaller and smaller and smaller. Obviously, the longer people are here without any form of security, then they're gone. The main thing here is this, and it's something that people really need to be cognizant of. If someone's been here for 20 years, it's because they're required to be here. They've maybe had work permit renewals for 20 years, which means that they're in a position that they really are needed. There's either not the Bermudian expertise or not enough Bermudians in certain fields, and that's why people are still in Bermuda and have managed to remain in Bermuda for the period of time that they have. So this isn't something that has just come about. It is as a result of all of the issues to do, as I said, with international law. There's also a convention, it's called the European Convention of Human Rights and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And that International Convention on Political Rights essentially makes it very clear that people who have remained in a jurisdiction for a long period of time are entitled to certain rights under international conventions. So that's a very important point for people to remember, that we've now entered an age where human rights, as we've seen in any number of judgments throughout the last number of years in Bermuda, are now really hitting home in Bermuda, and these things need to be rectified before the courts make us in a position where we have to.
So is there concerns then about breaching, as you mentioned, the European Convention of Human Rights?
Absolutely. As you'll know, we've seen any number of different cases in different areas under Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act law, and we've seen it in relation to other acts as well, where Bermuda has not been in line with international obligations to do with human rights. And that's one of, as I've said, one of the reasons that we really need to be considering these changes.
In terms of the Bermuda connection pathway to PRC, what does that entail?
Yeah, that's quite a different point. In fact, with the connection in respect of pathways for providing permanent residency, as I said, It's 20 years in the first instance for status, but permanent residency gives people another opportunity to get something after having been in Bermuda for a long period of time. There are going to be three real kind of ways of doing that. One will be someone who has been continuously resident in Bermuda for 15 years. It's very simple. They'll be eligible to apply for permanent residency. Now, I say that they're eligible to apply because there's conditions that would be attached to that, such as good character and conduct, no criminal convictions. Basically, the types of things that have always been looked at before people are granted such rights in Bermuda would still have to be fulfilled. That's a simple time point. They have to have been ordinarily resident in Bermuda during that period of time and the like. That fulfills those kinds of criteria. Then we would have pathways in respect of young people. So what we'd be looking at is people who have been born in Bermuda or have arrived before their 16th birthday would be eligible for permanent residency after 10 years of residency. And they'd have to then be eligible upon their 18th. So what we're saying is if you're born here, you've spent 10 continuous years, you're at least age 16, you can get it by your 18th birthday. What that does is gives those individuals who have been in Bermuda their whole lives, essentially, some opportunity to remain in Bermuda. That's a permanent residency certificate, which is obviously different from status. Permanent residency at least gives them the opportunity to remain in Bermuda, notwithstanding what may or may not happen with those individuals' parents. That gives them that opportunity. Finally, we'd be looking at, as you said, a Bermuda connection. And that would be eligible for permanent residency after 10 years upon having reached their 18th birthday. But in order to qualify for that pathway, the applicant must have a brother or sister who possesses Bermudian status, and that brother or sister didn't already qualify for status. So what we've seen repeatedly in the last number of years, and the previous government would have experienced the same thing, is where certain individuals were granted status and a brother or sister has missed out for some reason, like breaking residency for a very short period of time because maybe one parent returned to their place of origin. So we're keen to fix some of these inequities in the system. And every Bermudian knows someone like this. Everybody knows someone who has missed out on a real opportunity from the remain in Bermuda. And frankly, a lot of people think that these people are Bermudian because they've been here for so long. And the other one is where a natural parent of a person who possesses Bermudian status and that other parent doesn't qualify for a grant of status. So again, it's fixing inequities where one person has obtained status, another one hasn't. They'll be given opportunities to get a permanent residency certificate.
And just to clarify, you had said that 15 years for PRC and then 20 years for status. A PRC, if someone obtains PRC, do they wait 5 more years for status?
Yeah, well, what we're not going to say is you have to have PRC first and then get status. The benefit, of course, of obtaining a permanent residency certificate is it gives you that real sense of security that you can remain in Bermuda as a permanent resident. If after further 5 years, of course, if they've applied at 15 years and they get it and they wait another 5, they would be eligible at that stage to make an application for status. However, some people may say, I'm prepared to wait to get anything until 20 years, and that's for them. They'd have to wait until 20 years to get status. No matter what pathway you choose, will always be 20 years for status, and that's important to remember. There's no quicker way of getting it other than those individuals, if I may say, are individuals who have been adopted. So what we are looking at is putting into place provisions where someone who is adopted by a Bermudian and they were adopted before the age of 12 would then receive status. At the moment they are deemed, and what that means is they are deemed to be status, they obtain the rights and privileges of someone who has status, but they still have to make an application for full status, if you will, prior to their 22nd birthday. We think that's inequitable. We don't think that's fair. So again, what we're going to be doing is if you have been adopted and you're a Commonwealth citizen, so you're BOTC or you are from another Commonwealth jurisdiction, were here before the age of 12 as an adopted person, then you would be entitled to obtain status.
And what are some of the benefits you see to this new piece of legislation for Bermuda and also for Bermudians?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that we have to remember is that Bermuda is shrinking in terms of population. We have seen a complete decline in birth rates over the last 15 to 20 years. It's a steady decline. And of course, we've also seen an increase in the death rate in Bermuda as the baby boomers get older and pass away. So you're finding that we are essentially unable to keep up and be a sustainable population. So we need to be in a position now to be able to say, okay, those persons who have been here for a long time should be able to become Bermudian. Now, what does that mean? That means job security, but it also means that those individuals will continue to remain in Bermuda because they have that security to do so. And let's face it, if they've been here 20 years, they need to be here, or they should be here, because they're required to be here. They will be able to purchase property, and they'll be able to vote, and they'll be full members of society like any other person who's Bermudian. The PRC gives people security. They are able to buy houses at different ARV level. They have to pay a little tax extra tax to government in purchasing property. They're limited to 2 purchases only, and PRCs are not able to vote, so they are not full status holders. But it's really what we're doing here is securing Bermuda's future, and we're doing that by saying, look, again, our birth rate is not what it should be to sustain ourselves, and our death rate is obviously in a higher rate, so we're not able to sustain ourselves. So how can we sustain Bermuda? How can we sustain the goods and services that we rely upon? People who remain in Bermuda pay tax. They pay for the services that we all rely upon in terms of our education, our healthcare system, our public transport. The more people are here obtaining a longer term right, remain here, they contribute to the fabric of our society.
Now, conversations surrounding immigration, PRC, and status are always a hot topic.
Yeah.
What kind of criticisms do you expect?
You know, one of the primary criticisms that we often hear is that we're simply taking job opportunities or jobs away from Bermudians. And to me, that's simply not the case. And really, it never has been. One of the things that we've demonstrated, I think, over time is that as, for example, work permits have increased, job opportunities for Bermudian increases because unemployment is always lower. And there's a real big reason for that, and that is, as more people are on the island buying goods and services, that always translates into bigger and better opportunities for Bermudians. So people that are here, that obtain status, and they're no longer on a work permit, for example, they're here permanently, does that take job opportunities away from Bermudians? No. The reason they've lasted 20 years here or more, some people have been here 30, 35 years and have no pathway to anything. You might think they're already Bermudian. You might think they already have permanent residency. Some of them don't even have that. They're here because either Bermudians were unable to take certain positions because they didn't have the requisite skill set, or they didn't want a certain position. And that's why these people have stayed in Bermuda for as long as they have. They're required. They contribute to Bermuda through charity groups as well. And again, I think that every Bermudian knows someone, somewhere, who they believe is Bermudian. And we see it at the Department of Immigration all the time, people coming in saying, there's no pathway for me to remain, but I've been here my whole life. One story really struck me, Lisa, and that was a young lady came in to see us probably 7 or 8 months ago, and she's 24 years old. She came here when she was 2 years old, has been here her entire life, and is of Jamaican heritage. Her parents came here and were employed. They're still on a work permit, but this young lady's on a work permit as well. She works for a Bermudian entity. But what rights does she have? And the answer to that is right now, none. Because she has no rights here in Bermuda. She's on a work permit. You would think she's Bermudian when you talk to her. She has no other place she knows. So, to me, again, that's a prime example of an individual who everyone would believe is Bermudian, is not taking anything from anybody. And in our view, and in the view of the human rights and the European Conventions on Human Rights, should get something for that.
Now, you talked about the benefits, but from that last story, it seems like you're leaning towards this is the right thing to do.
That's the best way you could put it. It is absolutely the right thing to do. We've seen many polls as well that demonstrate that I think as well Bermudians understand that. I think we're going to get some who make noise and who want to distort the reality of this. But at the end of the day, it is the right thing to do for individuals who have been here for as long as they have. There's something I haven't said, and this is a very important thing. Bermuda is one of the only places in the entire world where people have no pathway to either a citizenship or a permanent right to be a resident of that country. There is nothing. I think one of them is North Korea, and another one is someplace you probably can't even find on a map. But most jurisdictions around the world have some form of pathway to get someone to a certain place. 20 years, in our view, is actually a long time. And for those jurisdictions that do have, which is most, some pathway to status or citizenship, it's a lot less than 20 years. Even our competitors to the south, if you will, in small jurisdictions in the islands that are dependent territories, have some pathway to status, or what is their similarity to status, and it's less than 20 years. So we're really at the extreme end of all of this. We've tried to be accommodating as we can to take into account our human rights obligations, our obligations under the European Convention of Human Rights and the right to family life, and the various conventions that attach to that. And we believe that with that 20 years, it is sufficient to take care of concerns that existing Bermudians have about lost job opportunities, even though I don't accept that that would represent one. But at the same time, giving people security who have spent a significant period of their time, of their lives.
Let's talk a little bit about the Crane and Korea case and the impact it's had on the immigration policy.
Do you know, that particular matter, of course, came up about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and some called it a loophole to status. And in fact, what the Chief Justice acknowledged was it was a sleeping provision. And what that provision said is if you had come to Bermuda prior to the 31st of July 1989 and had obtained permanent residency and then became naturalized, you were entitled to make an application for status. Now, at that time, our friends in the opposition said, well, that means tens of thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people will be entitled to this. And we said, well, that's simply not the case. And in fact, what we've seen since then is 750 applications out of what we believe to be a pool of around 1,400 that would be eligible based on the criteria. And again, as I said earlier on in this interview, we're not looking at thousands and thousands of people. We're looking at, I would say, 2,000 to 3,000 people would have eligibility for something like this. But that doesn't mean, as we've seen pursuant to the Karn and Korea judgment, that you'll get those numbers applying. When you look at that other judgment and people who had an opportunity to apply, we believed we had a pool of 1,400 plus children might get to about 1,600 or thereabouts. We've seen 750. So really under half of what we believe to be the pool of potential applicants have actually applied. So, this isn't going to make a huge difference to our dynamic of individuals. You're not going to all of a sudden see thousands of people showing up on our doorsteps. These are people already in Bermuda that are already in the fabric of our community that we see and are friends with and we deal with every single day in Bermuda.
And from your figures there alone, in February of last year, it was 620, and now it's 750. So just 130.
So you're looking at another 130, 140 applications over that period of time. So I think, again, when this legislation passes, what you will see is you may see an immediate flux of applications because of people who have been here for 25 or 30 years, 35 years that didn't get permanent residency for whatever reason prior to being here for 1989. But, again, there is no expectation of people now arriving that, say, come today to say, I have an expectation I'll get something. We will fix that by saying, well, if you get 20 years in, then you have an opportunity to apply. And of course, we make people that apply for work permits sign a declaration that they recognize they're not entitled to anything. But again, it's the right thing to do. If you've been here in any country for the period of time that we're talking about, it is the right thing to do to give people something in return for having made that investment in our country.
And in what kind of circumstances do you imagine that an application could be denied?
The Act will remain clear. The Act will remain clear about your ordinary residence in Bermuda, so you can't break residence. You can't say, well, I've been in Bermuda for 20 years, off and on for 20 years. It has to be a continuous residency requirement for that period of time. You have to be of the right moral turpitude in the discretion of the minister. But you also have to be free of relevant criminal convictions. So, you're not saying, and you have to be of good character and conduct. You'll still have to go through an application process and get people to give you a reference to say that, yes, this is a good person. This isn't someone who has been in prison for various terrible offenses. You're looking at people who, again, have remained in Bermuda and probably have continuous work permits because they fit that criteria already in point of fact. Applications will still have to be advertised in the newspaper as they always have been. We are using all of the criteria, in fact, that has historically been used under the Bermuda Immigration Protection Act from 1956 and onwards about good character and conduct, lack of criminal conviction, and those things will remain. Instead of having a cutoff date, what we'd be saying is, if you hit a certain period of time, then you have the eligibility to apply. It is not automatic by any means.
Now, I understand there's a public meeting coming up just to give out more information to the public in a forum. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we can expect and when?
Sure. It'll be coming. We've got a couple dates lined up. They'll be advertised as appropriate. But what we'll be doing is presenting much of the information that I'm sharing today, what we would have heard in the press conference quite recently as well. But I think as well what you'll hear some real human stories of individuals who have been here for a long, long period of time. So people start to understand that it is your neighbor. It is someone that is already to be even thought of as Bermudian. They've been here so long, you pass them in the street. And I think you're not going to hear much different, but what we will be able to do is get more granular in the public forums and answer questions and concerns that people may have. But again, I think the data demonstrates, certainly polls we've seen, that well in excess of 50% of Bermudians are in favor of this, and some people don't have really any concern in any way, so they don't even say yes or no. But it's a minority of people that are against this in any event, because I think, again, people recognize what is the right thing to do, and the right thing to do is to give opportunity for people who have been here for a long period of time.
And have you seen a shift in people's attitudes towards the subject?
I believe so. I think that there has certainly been a shift in mindset that, we are a multi-jurisdictional, multi-ethnic community. And that means we have people here from all over the world. We are a part of the world in the most grand scheme of things. And I think people are starting to understand that people coming in from away does benefit everybody. It benefits our community as a whole, benefits whether you are black or white, you're a senior or someone who is 2 or 3 years old. We all benefit from people being here because everyone has to pay taxes. Everyone has to make a contribution to the community to have its vibrancy. We are a nation of immigrants. No one was here when Bermuda was first settled. And over the time, we've seen waves of different people that have come to Bermuda from the Azores, from St. Kitts, from the UK, from Canada, and from all over the world. But that's what we are. And people that have made that commitment to our community, I think that we should show them the commitment and our thanks by giving something in return.
On that note, thanks very much, Minister. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you for joining us. Join us next time right here on CITV In the Know.